Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for coming today. We know there's still some people jumping in from the waiting room, so I'm just going to start my introductions, but there's going to be some other people trickling in. I'm Tom Swenson. I'm the NIPD's Education and Outreach Coordinator. I know most of you, but in case you're someone that I haven't met, I just wanted to introduce myself. But again, all your names do seem pretty familiar. We want to welcome all of our MS4 contacts and their consultants that we see on a monthly basis to another one of our PTAP webinars, and anyone else from their municipal side or organizations that are here to learn about PTAP. We're excited that you're all here. We felt now that we've wrapped up year six and we've gotten through the holiday season, and I hope everyone's recovered from all the food and family parties. We thought it now would be the time to kind of circle back and start to talk more about PTAP again. We did use PTAP in year seven, but we know that the time frame to get, or excuse me, we did use PTAP in year six, but we know that the time frame to get information in was very short. And we've heard from multiple communities that they're looking to use PTAP in year seven, our current MS4 permit year. And we wanted to take a second to go through how to use PTAP, how to log in, how to register, and use all that information. So we're going to take time today to go through that, but we're also going to take a little bit of time to look at some common mistakes that people have made in the past with PTAP, and ways to avoid that. So again, welcome. One thing we did wanted to also share is I don't know if anyone here knows Ted Deers. You probably heard the name. He's our assistant water division director at the DES, and he's been involved with PTAP along with Jamie and Gretchen and Daniel for a long time. And he had a task, or he took it upon himself in meetings past to create posters relating to PTAP. So we wanted to keep that tradition going. If you've been using PTAP for a while, you'll probably recognize this. I also wanted to thank the Jamie Poole from UNH Stormwater Center and Daniel McAdam for helping put on this workshop, and Sally Soul because they've been involved with PTAP for so long. And before we get into this too, we're going to go through the current MS4 requirements and how they relate to PTAP and how it can be used. But I did want to acknowledge that the chairs from both coalitions, along with Dina Hoffman from Pelham, Jamie Houle, Deb Loisel, and myself, have gone through the 2024 draft Mass MS4 general permit. And as we went through this general permit, we did notice that nutrient tracking is a large requirement in this new permit. And as we've shared at previous coalition meetings, the goal for EPA is to make the Mass general permit and the New Hampshire general permit, MS4 general permits, as similar as possible. So we predict that nutrient tracking is going to be something that will be required for all permittees when the new version of the New Hampshire MS4 permit comes out. So we just wanted to acknowledge that. We've been mentioning that at coalition meetings, but we're saying that if you are able and if you are willing, using PTAP is really going to help you prepare for the future when it comes to MS4 requirements. We also wanted to remind everybody that throughout this workshop, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. And as we move through different subjects, we'll make sure that we're answering your questions. So before we jump into the meat of what we're going to talk about, which is entering information into PTAP, I just wanted to talk about the actual MS4 requirements. So again, we just talked about the draft Massachusetts MS4 permit, but this is specifically for the current 2017 New Hampshire MS4 permit. So again, like we mentioned, all permittees can use PTAP if they choose to. We're encouraging everybody to, but there are certain permittees that do have to do nutrient tracking, and we're encouraging people to use PTAP to do this if you don't have a system in place within your organization to track nutrient reductions. So permittees with phosphorus TMDLs, nitrogen impairments, and phosphorus impairments do have requirements in the current version of the permit to track nutrient reductions. For those with phosphorus impairments, and I hope you know who you are. If you don't, feel free to reach out and I can let you know. There's something that you have to do within your phosphorus TMDL requirements that's a performance evaluation. And this involves tracking the amount of phosphorus reductions achieved through your implemented structural and non-structural BNPs. And you also have to track the amount of phosphorus increases resulting from new development in your LPCP area, which is your Lake Phosphorus Control Plan, which relates to your phosphorus TMDL. We'll focus more on the new development phosphorus loading elsewhere, but just know that is something you have to track, but we're working on a way to do that. So along those same lines, if you have a phosphorus TMDL, you have to do your annual calculations, which goes hand in hand with that performance evaluation. You have to make sure you're tracking your non-structural BMP nutrient reductions, your structural BMP nutrient reductions, your new development increases, and then you're going to use that information to calculate your yearly phosphorus export rate. And then those for nitrogen or phosphorus impairments, which that affects a lot of communities compared to the phosphorus TMDLs, you're going to want to make sure you're tracking any of your structural BMP information. And as you'll see in this second sentence here, the permittee shall document the BNP type, the total area treated by the BNP, the design storage volume of the BNP, and the estimated nitrogen/phosphorus removed in mass per year by the BNP in each annual report. So you can enter this information into PTAP, and then it'll give you your PTAP annual report, which you can use in your MS4 annual report towards the end of the year. So we just want to do a very basic review of that, but I'm going to pass it over to Jamie Houle, who's going to teach you more about how to get into the PTAP database if you haven't beforehand. Oh, you're muted, Jamie.
All right, thanks, Tom. So I'll share my screen. And yeah, welcome everybody. It's a new year. Just wanted to also give a little bit of context. We did these workshops last year, and we decided because of the new draft permit anticipation and other things, we just decided to start the series over. So this is going to be a series of trainings, starting with this one, which is the most basic. So we're just going to cover basic information for all kind of authenticated users to put data into PTAP. And then subsequently, next time we're going to focus on structural controls now, like built systems. Next time we'll focus on non-structural controls like sweeping and catch basin cleaning. Those are the two that are called out in the permit anyway that require tracking and accounting. And then finally, we'll end up with a third training on kind of advanced uses. And this would be more for municipalities that are trying to incorporate utilization of PTAP as part of their kind of permitting scheme, because this also extends to private development as well. That needs to be tracked and accounted for. All right. So I think I shared my screen already. Am I sharing our mascot, the ship sailing in the fog? I think we used to joke that the ship sailing in the fog was kind of like the marker of PTAP. I think we've kind of emerged out of the fog, and we have a pretty clear path moving forward. It's been, this activity has been substantiated in our permits, and certainly in the drafts that we're seeing coming out, much, much more substantiated than it ever has been. So it's about as clear a day on the PTAP horizon as we've had. Sorry about that. All right. So I'm just going to start really briefly talking about the user types. We've got really 4 fundamental user types, only 3 of which probably you're going to be interacting with. The first one, we work with our research computing center at UNH. They have helped us develop the database. They help us. We're always finding bugs. They help us solve bugs and problems. They also help us with advancements when people ask, hey, could you link a email account to the input data that is going into PTAP? So if we have a problem with it, we can contact the inputter directly, and we go to RCC, and in most cases, they are very expeditious about implementing improvements. So certainly PTAP is definitely a work in progress. So feel free to add suggestions and send us comments in different ways to make it better. Then we go down to the site administrator. So right now, I think primarily that is myself, Daniel, and Sally. And so, our job really is to work with people that want accounts and sift through the thousands of emails that we get annually. For some reason, I don't know, there's just bots out there that are constantly trying to get PTAP accounts. And so we have a fair amount of accounts that we delete. And then if for some reason you have signed up for an account and you still don't have access to the database, that's when you would contact myself or Daniel or Sally or all three of us, and we're usually pretty quick about solving those problems. Um, then we have the town administrator. So the town administrator is really it's really the database administrator for the town. So the idea is um, authenticated users input data. Most developments or projects are associated with a town. That's one of the required fields in the database. And then those inputs go to the town database administrator to authenticate. So this is really this authentication piece is really the unique part of the tracking that PTAP does, because things can't just go into the database. They have to be accepted by the municipal administrator. So every town should have one. We can have multiple administrators for towns. That's not a problem. Um, the issue is just, the more administrators, the more it's hard to track, who's authorizing what. We also added town employee, just so if you did want to move forward with one administrator, one person that's in charge of accepting and changing the status of um, inputs to the database, you can nominate town employees who can look at all the inputs to the database, but they just wouldn't have the authority to change the status of a project or accept it into the database. That would be the role of the administrator. So we added this just in case you wanted to share things, or you had other employees that might be reviewing and providing feedback, and you still wanted to maintain a hierarchy within the municipality of one person that is kind of overseeing all the inputs into the database. And then finally, we get down to the authenticated user. So anybody can be an authenticated user. Essentially, you just go through this process where we review there that has legitimate uses for the database. Um, and that can be anybody. It can be consultants, it can be town employees, it can be just about anybody who wants to put things into the database. But again, all entries have to be associated with the town and have to be accepted into the database by that town administrator. So that's the general hierarchy. What I think I want to do now is just exit out of this and go into online and just show you how you can sign up for an account. So I want to start really simple. PTAP is on our database at the Stormwater Center. It's buried under projects. So if you click on projects, and we recently kind of fell under our cooperative extension system. So it's, did I just pass it? Yeah. So it's here under projects. What we've tried to do is we really are trying to migrate this to the DES website, where that'll be its permanent home, and it's not going to be associated by changes at the university. So how do you find this information? There's a lot of resources. If you haven't looked through the DES blog, I mean, this is one of my go-to spots. If you just click on or Google New Hampshire DES Stormwater blog, it'll take you to DES's stormwater page. And again, I'm just starting really simple. Most of you probably have this on speed dial. If you scroll down, there's all kinds of resources here. What you want to do is go to the blog. And then in the blog, there's this section. So you can, all the great work that the coalitions are doing is located here. But if you click on permitting specific resources, oh no, did I not do this right? Tom, help me. New Hampshire resources. Okay, sorry. If you go to New Hampshire resources, you'll see PTAP located here. And then this is going to be, like I said, the permanent home with PTAP. This training is going to be hosted here. And then the same information that's on our website is also here. So yeah, we're kind of trying to set this up as a permanent home. Past trainings are recorded here. So as well as links to the database. I can click on this. Now you're at the home page of the database, and the first thing you'll want to do is log in. If you are new, you'll just create a new account. It'll ask you for an email address, a username, and then verification that you're not a robot. Uh, it's amazing how we have multiple verification steps, but there's still a lot of spam that gets through. Um, once you sign up, then we will authenticate and just verify that this is something that is legitimate. If you have a problem with your password, we do not have your passwords. We don't know your passwords. We don't not see your passwords. It's something that you generate. So we cannot send you your password. All you simply have to do is click this button, reset your password. So it assumes that you have an email associated with your account, and then you enter your email. It'll send you directions on entering a new password. So it's pretty much as easy as that. Any questions? Anything in the chat?
I will add, Jamie, I just put the link to PTAP in the chat. So if you want to register during the workshop, just to get the process going, Sally Soul is in there now approving accounts.
In real time.
In
All
real,
right.
yes.
This doesn't happen very often. All
I
right.
think one tricky thing though is Jamie and Thomas, because it's people who approve your counts, not like some robot or something, we don't always know what permission level you are. So, or that you need, whether you need to be a town administrator or, you know, authenticated user, whatever. So you may hear from us to ask what kind of level you need for permission. You could also sort of email us to let us know what you might need. So yeah, and I think the PTAP permission levels, if I'm correct, they're on the website. So I think you can kind of go and look at that schematic that Jamie showed if you need a refresher for what sort of level of access you might need. But I do see requests coming in now, so I'll get to work.
All right. Yeah, and we do have several consultants that are administrators for their towns. Essentially, what we ask is that the request come from the town. So, if you're a consultant that is going to be administrating the database on behalf of the town, please just include them in the email because, we're, like it is humans on the back end, and we try to be sensitive about the data and giving out permission. So, yeah. Just a very brief note on the type of information you really need to enter things into the database. There's four fundamental things that you need that are pretty easy to generate if you have a stormwater management plan or you even have some type of retrofit or structural control that you're getting ready to implement. The first is the impervious cover, the contributing area. And in PTAP, we pretty much only care about the impervious cover. So there's no real, you don't have to do overland flow or runoff coefficients. We're just concerned about the acreage of impervious cover contributing to the system. The next thing is the design storage volume. So every structural control has a design storage volume. Daniel's going to go into the direct calculation of that next. But we need that. You need the BMP type. So there's a list of 10 and growing number of structural controls that we can enter into the debate database, and you just need to categorize your BMP according to that. And then you need the hydrologic soil group. So oftentimes you can get this information from something like Web Soil Survey. They can be an estimate. We just ask that you pick a more conservative hydrologic soil group. So if you're a hydrologic soil group AB, you want to go with the most conservative. We don't have an AB choice, so you'd want to go with a B soil or something that is associated with the more conservative choice. All right. The last thing is, again, on the website, both the DES website and our website, we have this crosswalk that was generated just because the MS4 permit in Appendix F has different names and different terminologies for different systems. The New Hampshire manual, the Mass manual, all the state manuals have different terminology for everything. But we tried to develop a crosswalk to help pigeonhole your treatment system into the appropriate category, BMP category to classify it as or model it as in PTAP. And then, of course, if you still don't have a great answer, we see in the draft Mass RDA, you're supposed to propose the most appropriate system that aligns best with the unit operations, unit processes of the structural control that you're implementing. So you find the best fit. All right. And with that, I think I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll hand it over to Daniel.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. First, I have a new microphone. Can you hear me? I see a thumbs up. Great. So let me share my screen. And we'll start with just the PowerPoint. So just a couple definitions. Actually, before, let me just show the PowerPoint, not confuse you too much yet. So a couple definitions for the performance curves and how you calculate things. The calculations are going to be handled after your entry automatically, so you don't have to worry too much about the actual calculation, but you have to know these to be able to put in the right information into your entry. So design storage volume, that is a big new term here for a lot of people, and I want to focus on the term volume. So this is the volume of water that can be stored in the system in your structural control. So how do you calculate a volume? The simplest way is length times width times depth, right? So that's L, W, and D. And then porosity. So length times width times depth gives you an empty volume. If you multiply that by your porosity, that reduces the amount of material that you have in there. So you shrink your DSV. Of course, A for surface area. And then another new term for some people is physical storage capacity, or PSC. And that is the depth of direct runoff. So we're going to look at a couple examples here next. So one quick DSV calculation here as an example. I'm going to go through it a little bit quickly, but you'll have it on the recording. You can always go back to it and pause it if you want to work through it. But this is the DSV equation comes right out of the permits in Appendix F. There's tables that give you all these equations for different SCMs. So for example, for an infiltration basin or surface infiltration, or a rain garden or bioretention with no underdrain. Again, Jamie just went through that crosswalk. So ultimately, this is for the infiltration basin curve. So the DSV is the sum of all of the volumes of in your cross section. So we have the ponding on top, and then the soil, and then the stone. So you're calculating the area times the depth for each layer. If you have a material that has a porosity, you have area times depth times the porosity of that material. So we have the ponding, and then soil, and then the stone. And assuming the porosity of soil is about 0.2 and the stone is 0.4, I put in a couple of given dimensions here. So if you know your total footprint is 400 square feet, ponding depth of 1 foot, and then soil depth is 2 feet, and below that you have stone depth of 1.5 feet. And for the second part of the calculation, our impervious cover is 2 acres. So calculating the DSV, you just plug all these right into the area times depth times porosity, and we end up with a DSV of 800 cubic feet. So that means 800 cubic feet of water can be statically plopped into this bioretention. And then to calculate the PSC, which is the physical storage capacity, which is the depth of direct runoff, we have units of cubic feet, so we have to divide by an area, and that area is the impervious cover with a unit conversion. So DSV divided by 3630, and that's a unit conversion, times your impervious cover in acres. So 800 divided by 3630 times 2 acres, you end up with a PSC of 0.11 inches. In other words, with an impervious cover of 2 acres, 0.11 inches of direct runoff over that impervious cover gives you 800 cubic feet of, of runoff that's stored in your bioretention. We have a table in here for reference. Again, you can go back to this if you need to for infiltration capacity. This is pretty well known. It's a common table from Rawls, which relates different texture soils to the hydrologic soil groups, which are commonly used, as well as the infiltration rate. For PTAP, the only thing you need to know is the infiltration rate. So if you have field tests and you have directly measured infiltration rates, you can use that, or you can use this table to estimate it. For example, if it's in the design phase and you haven't actually tested yet. One thing to know for PTAP, we have drop-down lists. So if you have an infiltration rate that is measured in between any of these, for to be conservative, you would always go to the next lowest number. So for example, if we're right on this line and we have an infiltration rate of 0.4, you would go down to 0.27. So once you have the information, there's the question of how to report it. So first step is to put it into PTAP. So that's the database where we'll do the batch tracking and accounting. And from that, we can actually, sorry, that's the tracking and accounting. And from that, we can use a batch tool, which is the BAT tool. And that can take all those entries and calculate the credits for every single entry and put it into one neat report for you. So here's the website for the actual BAT tool. But as I mentioned before, at the end of August or so, and I think Tom's going to talk more about the dates. So we'll actually go through and create reports for every town that has entries in PTAP. All right, so I'm going to go through an example to make this concrete and show you how it works. And you'll have this example to go back to if that's helpful. And for this example, we're going to have a high school. This is a fictional high school. The reason we're doing a high school is to help practitioners have a real example to work with. And we're choosing the high school because most towns have a high school. And it's the largest impervious cover compared to other municipally owned properties. So if you can manage your impervious cover in your high school, you've crossed off a big chunk of your municipal impervious cover. What we're going to do, we're going to enter and calculate credits for one subsurface infiltration practice and one bioretention. So here's our site. It's just a satellite image. Hopefully everybody recognize what things are. It's a pretty typical high school. So you have your big building. Here's a big flat roof right up front. Your big parking lot up front, a couple tennis courts, tracks, another parking lot. We're not going to manage all of it. We're going to go pretty quickly through this example. As Jamie mentioned, we're only looking at impervious cover for PTAP, so you don't have to worry about the pervious cover and all the runoff for that. So if you delineate all the impervious cover here, our total is 18.99 acres. And for this example, we're only going to look at two. We're going to look at the rooftop and the front parking lot. So one system at a time, subsurface infiltration, that's just for the rooftop. So we're going to direct all the rooftop to some subsurface infiltration out in the field. Impervious acreage is 4.56 acres. Let's assume for this we have 0.27 inches per hour infiltration rate out in the soil. And I have a couple design details. If you calculate your DSV, just like we did in the example before, area times times depth times porosity. We're going to end up with a DSV of about 16,000 cubic feet. And your PSC, remember, so that's the DSV divided by 3630 times the acres of impervious cover. Our PSC is 1 inches. In other words, we can store 1 inch of direct runoff in that infiltration SCM. So that's it. That's all the information you need to enter into PTAP for this SCM. And notice I have a couple of sections, a couple texts bolded. Those are the pieces of information that you need for PTAP. So you need the impervious cover, acreage. You need, if it's an infiltration SCM, you need the infiltration rate. You need the DSV, and you need the PSC. Next, and I'll go quicker through this, it's the same setup. This is just for the bioretention out front. So we have the same infiltration rate, footprint of 20 by 200, just kind of a typical 6 inches of ponding, 1.5 feet of soil, 2 feet of stone in the cross section. If you calculate your DSV, again, area times depth times porosity of each layer, add them up. You get 7,900 cubic feet. And calculating the PSC, the 7,900 cubic feet divided by 3630 times the acreage of impervious cover, you get 0.54 inches. So that's it. Take the bold pieces of information and you're ready to go into PTAP.
So Daniel,
Yeah.
can you just go back to that slide? So we have the system type bolded there at the top, the
Yep.
impervious cover contributing, the hydrologic soil group, and you really just need the DSV, right? Because the DSV, the PSC is going to be calculated based on the DSV and the contributing area.
Right. So that's the minimum that you need. But to actually put it into PTAP, you do need to enter the PSC. So it should
As
be
well.
calculated.
So
Should
it's
be
not just a
calculated.
calculation. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. At this point, it's you need both. All right, and I have some screenshots here in the PowerPoint. I'm also going to go through it live. So if you're following along at home and you want to practice on this, feel free. You can go through this with me now, and if it's too quick, you can always go back to the video. And with that, I need to stop sharing and share my screen. All right, get out of the way, Zoom. All right, so I'm going to start just as Jamie did back at Google, and I'm going straight to the PTAP database. I don't remember the blog URL, but if you search NHDES PTAP, the very first link is the PTAP blog. So here we are back at the same page Jamie had. This is the DES MS4 resources blog. Scroll down here where big old text that says PTAP database. This will take you to the database. And I've already logged in. Now that I'm here, if you already have your user set up, you've already applied, and you have your level assigned to you. Now you're ready to submit. So you can, a couple things up here. Home will always take you back to this screen. Add submission is if you want to enter a new submission. My submissions take you to your list of all the submissions that you have entered. We have instructions if you ever need extra help, and then we'll come to reports and import later. So I'm going to go to add submission. And I'll just call this the high school example. And you'll notice a couple of things. Only the entries that, or only the sections that have a red asterisk are required. So that's the bare minimum that you need to put in an entry. If you have other information that you or your town would like to track, feel free to put in as much as you'd like. But for the bare minimum for it to be accepted and to get credit, you have to look for this red asterisk. So I'm going to check, this is for a municipality. It's within an MS4 area. and it discharges to an impaired water body. Again, these are extra, but it helps you track. Going down to, this is all at the site level, so not the SEMs, just the site. So we're looking at the site, for this example, the high school property. So if you have the parcel information, the address, you can enter all that in here. What is required is the town. And I think I assigned myself to Lee for this example because they don't have other entries. And land use type. So this will determine the loading rate for your reductions. So I'm going to choose commercial and industrial. You also have low density residential, medium density residential, and multifamily and high density. Right here, I'm going to jump ahead to one of the commonly asked questions or issues. If you select other, which gives you the option to still enter the entry and have it be accepted, it can't actually get credit because there's no loading rate associated with other. So this is just for acceptance in PTAP database, but if you put other for pretty much any category, you won't actually get credit for those SCMs. So I'll choose commercial. And the next section here, the first part is structural BMP.
Sorry, Daniel, one thing,
Yep.
on the land use selection too, what we've said, if you don't know, or if you have no idea, medium density residential is what we tell people to select as a default. And again, the other is there because we want to track things and be able to account for things that might not be in the database, but it's not going to lead to credits. So your best bet is to stay within the drop-down menu, but
Yep.
others there because people just ask for it.
Yep. And we have had cases where, people ask for an other category and they put them in. We have a couple of years worth of entries, and then all of a sudden we figure out how to adapt credits or adapt loading and change and recategorize that other into something that has a number. So, if you have something that's an other, please put it in. That's great. But if you want credit, as Jamie said, either choose the correct land use type, or you can assume it's medium density residential. All right, so that's everything for the site level. Now we're going to the individual SCMs, which are still BMPs and PTAP. So first section is structural BMPs. So I just want to give a quick layout of the actual page. This whole section is structural BMPs. This next section is for non-structural BMPs. And then we have land use conversion below that and wastewater management table below that. So right now we're just going to stick in the structural. So we'll just stay up in this section. And we have our two entries from the examples. And we've already calculated everything, so it's going to be pretty quick to put in. So we have an infiltration or surface infiltration for the first part. And I'll just put these numbers in real quick. And then we can talk about them. So design storm depth, this is the PSC, or the physical storage capacity in inches. And infiltration rate. I'm going to jump ahead to another common issue here. If you are selecting an infiltration BMP and you select an infiltration rate of either NA or 0, it will not receive credit. Right? So think about what's physically happening. If it's a physical like if there's supposed to be infiltration, but you're saying the infiltration rate is 0, there's not going to be any infiltration and no credit. Similarly for NA, that means it doesn't know which performance curve to select to calculate the credit. So this is a real common issue with infiltration systems. If you have infiltration systems and you're not getting credit and you think you should, go back and double check, and I would start with infiltration rate. Okay, so for this example, we have 0.27. So that's it. So that's our first row. Because I have another BMP on the same site, I can add a row. And here I can enter the biofiltration. Populate those real quick. And that's it. That's it. So just like that, we've entered both of our BMPs. You'll see the total impervious acreage that's managed. So the total, oh, and that has not updated. There we go. So our total impervious acreage managed is 8.57 acres. Jamie, do you want to mention anything with the structural BMP list while I'm here?
So these come right from the permit. We are trying to adapt them and we're continually working on them. The good news about the accounting versus the tracking, which is you're tracking now. So you're just adding all the relevant information. That stuff will always remain relevant, right? If the credits change because the models are rerun or we're improving upon the science and therefore coming up with better credits, we're still accessing all the relevant data that you're putting into this database at this point. So it's really easy once you have the relevant information into the database, it's really easy to make adjustments in the future as and if and when the science changes. I think the the trickiest thing for this drop-down list is identifying the best model to use. So for instance, Daniel, you use
Oh,
biofiltration, yet you're identifying an
that's an
infiltration
error.
rate,
Yeah,
right? So a
just thought about that.
biofiltration assumes that there's an underdrain and there's no infiltration. So any system that doesn't include infiltration, there's only one performance curve. So biofiltration, only one performance curve. Therefore, if you select zero, it will still calculate a result. You won't calculate it is um, if you don't assume infiltration and for some reason you're identifying that the system would operate as infiltration. As Daniel said, the infiltration system, if you put zero, it's got, you know, uh, uh, six curves to choose from. And it doesn't know which one to choose because you didn't identify a hydrologic soil group. So, that's I think the biggest um, issue with the drop down list. Identify whether you're anticipating infiltration or not, and then from there select the appropriate system. For instance, like a porous pavement. Um, I could model a porous pavement as a infiltration system. I just calculate the design storage volume within my entire cross section, and it's going to behave and operate the exact same way. So there's flexibility in the application. You're just kind of going back to, again, what is the primary unit operation that this system is imparting control with? That's the primary question. And so if you don't know, there's another category. Um, but the best advice that we have is identify something that's most appropriate. So the thing that's missing here is a lot of manufactured treatment devices that are sized based on a flow rate, and we are working on those curves right now. And we're also working on impervious cover disconnection that will probably make its way into the database soon.
Yeah, great. And while you were saying that, I realized I picked the wrong category for the example. So I selected biofiltration because I was using a bioretention, but there's no underdrain and it does have infiltration. So really, I should have selected surface infiltration. So if your SEM, your BMP has infiltration, there's only two curves that are applicable, and they both start with infiltration. So if you're expecting infiltration, make sure you pick one of those two. Again, while I'm here, if you select other, no matter what you put in here, you will not get credit for that entry. So it can still go into the database for your tracking, but you will not get credits. And again, just to reiterate, if you select one of the two infiltration systems, there must be an associated greater than 0 infiltration rate. Otherwise, you won't get credit. All right, so just like that, we entered everything we need to for our first entry. We have all the site information. We entered our two structural BMPs, assuming there's nothing else on the site, and we're going to skip that for this training. Make sure you check this box. There's a little red asterisk just saying that you've reviewed it and you assume it's correct, and save. Whoa, what is that? Okay, I don't like, I was hoping for a really clean entry here. This is the problem with doing things live. Okay, there we go. I think I just had to refresh. So I came up with two errors, and this is a great time, and I'm jumping ahead to some of our common problems. You think you put everything in if you just go about your day. This entry did not actually make it. So make sure you check this box at the top after you click save. You should have a green box that says your submission has been successfully saved. This has a red box showing me a couple errors. Impervious surface must be greater than 0 in design storage depth. Oh, somehow I don't know why something wrong with my browser. So I'm just going to put 1 in real quick just for the example. Sorry about that. I don't know why it did that. All right, apparently my browser is freaking out right now, so I'm going to pretend that it worked. Sorry about that. I don't know what is going on. If it's something I'm not in the database side, I will follow up on that. But I can go back to at least the PowerPoint. So if it's successfully saved, you should end up with a green bar up here, which says it's been successfully saved. And I'm going to go back up to the submissions. I guess I go to my submissions. Oh, it didn't save it. So another common issue is the approval status. Only submissions that have approved and implemented status get credit. So this is kind of a hierarchy. It's a progression of your project. So a new submission is brand new. And the others are for the town administrators to update that project. So if the project's on hold, you can put that on hold and the entry is still there, so you can always update it at a later date. If it's rejected by the administrator, obviously it doesn't get credit. Submission is approved means that the town administrator has approved the project, but it's not actually implemented. It's not built and, you know, treating stormwater. So the project is approved, but it's not implemented. The last one is it's approved and it's implemented doing the work. If it's doing the work, you get credit. So this is a really common issue if you put in an entry and you're not getting credit and you expect it to be getting credit, go back and check the status, make sure it's approved and implemented. How you do that, if you have your list of entries here, over on the right, the very first one I have high school examples, so I know this is the project that I want to update. Over on the right, on submissions, you can go back and look at the entry. You can also click on the drop-down arrow. The drop-down arrow gives you an option to edit submission. So a town administrator would come in here and click edit. And I'm hoping this worked, and it did. So you'll see all the information that you entered before. And at the very bottom, there's approval status, which obviously was not there when we first entered it. Now we can go in and update that approval status once it's approved and implemented. And of course, save it. I don't know why it's doing that, but apparently it's working. So you update it to approved and implemented, and after that, it'll receive credit.
Yeah, can you just go back to that? Because There you go. Oh, oh no, to the view
The
submissions.
list. Sure.
Yeah, because it obviously saved it.
Yeah, there's
Something with your
something on my
browser.
end going on.
All right.
So that's it. You can also always filter here. So if you're able to submit, say you're an authenticated user and you submit for multiple towns, and you want to go back and look at your entries, you can filter for the town that you're looking for, as well as specific um, status.
Daniel, I have a question. See, when they're
Yeah.
entering the BMP or SCUM information, if they
Mhm.
are a town administrator, can they approve it right away, or do they have to go in here to approve it later on?
You still have to go in here. So add submission, there's not an option to give it an approval. There, not an option to give it a status. So when you add a submission, it's automatically a new submission. After that, you can go in and change the status.
All right, so that, okay, thank you.
Hmm. Yep, good question. And I'm going to skip these next couple slides. They're pretty quick, but from here, if it has a status of approved and implemented, um, the way we would give it credit is make sure it's approved and implemented. And then we have these batch tools, which basically batches, it exports a CSV that's able to go directly into the EPA BAT tool, um, to create a credit report. So I'm not going to do that here, but what you end up with is a report. And for this example, it'll show you your total phosphorus, nitrogen, and sediment loads for each structural, non-structural, and land use conversion, as well as your total. So this report is ready to submit for your report. And just a really quick recap. So just in a couple minutes, we identified and treated 45% of the impervious area for the whole high school with just those two structural BMPs. And we entered it into PTAP, and we're able to export it for credit. And you'll get 11 pounds of phosphorus per year, 83 pounds of nitrogen, and over 3,000 pounds of TSS just with those two entries. So that's the power of being able to put it in here and track it, and that'll give you those credits for your report annually as long as it's maintained. Some common reasons that entries don't get credits. And I think I've mentioned all of these, but I'll go through them real quick again. The main thing that we see is status. The status must be approved and implemented to get credit. Any entry that doesn't have that status will not get credits. It won't show up in your final report. How you do that is the PTAP town administrator has to go in for each entry and update the status to that level. Another one is just missing fields or incorrect information. So again, if it's an infiltration system, make sure you put in an infiltration rate, right? It's expecting all the proper information. So you have to have the impervious cover, the DSV, the PSE, and potentially infiltration rate. Sometimes it requires units. That's mostly for the non-structural. So you have to select the right units. And there's the next one's for non-structural, which we haven't covered, but right now I'll just mention that only catch basin cleaning and street sweeping have associated credits. So again, there's other entries in there or other options, but currently they're not being credited. And then structural BMPs or the land use of other does not receive credit because there's no associated performance curve with other. So right now it's just being tracked but not credited. And lastly, just simple typos, so make sure you go back and check that. Happens to all of us. So that is all I have for my entry example and common questions. So I think we're going to open it up to in our last minutes for discussion and questions. Feel free to unmute yourself or drop a question or comment in the chat. And Tom and Jamie, if you have anything else to add, or feel free to jump in.
Do we want to say a few words just about the reporting? currently for all New Hampshire towns, we're doing the reporting just because the bat, I, if you've used the bat before, it's a little quirky at times. We've developed kind of a backdoor export feature that allows us to import data into the bat and avoid kind of the going through the front door. It's a lot more manageable in that respect because again, we're just focusing on those 4 or 5 elements. Um, right. We don't the bat track can track over 100 different attributes. And realistically, we're just calculating 4 or 5. But we do have a project that's funded by the Municipal Alliance for Adaptive Management, MAM, and we're trying to because these metrics are fast changing. So sweeping, we've seen changes in the credits. We just developed credits for sewering as well, non-point source reduction credits for removing point of view septic systems. Um, and the bat can't really track those. We're also looking at updates to things like rain barrel. And as I mentioned, impervious cover disconnection, those are kind of evolving credits that we're hoping to be able to account for. And the bat, isn't updated that quickly. So we're hoping to generate a new calculator that can keep up with, these exciting and fast changes in the credits that are available. Daniel, anything else?
No, I think that's good.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Again, we acknowledge that last year there was a rush to get things into PTAP. Um, and we we were all talking, everyone on the PTAP planning side of things, and we wanted to make sure we got this started early. So start to, even if you don't have an account with PTAP, make an account. So when that time comes when you want to get information in, you can just do it. You're not waiting for someone to approve it. Like Sally mentioned, someone has to physically approve it to make sure you're not spam or a Russian hacker or something like that. We always make jokes about that because apparently everyone wants to get into PTAP. We're not sure why. But just get the process started. And I will share too that we've set a deadline of July 1st, 2025 for your year 7 requirements. Any of your year 7 nutrient reductions that you want to claim on your year 7 annual reports, make sure those are in to PTAP by July 1st, 2025. And we'll continue to mention this at the coalition meetings as well. But we just wanted to put that date out there so people are aware. That leaves a little over 6 months to try to start to process how to use PTAP to get in there, learn the process. As Daniel's mentioned, all of these recordings are online on the PTAP website. This one will be as well. So there's a structural one which was went a little more in depth from earlier. I think it was in June of last year, and then in August we did another one that focused on a non-structural. So take a look at those, learn them. If you have questions, reach out to us as well. We're here to help. It's a process, it's a learning curve, and those that used PTAP in year 6 know that you've got to figure out how it works. But once you know it, you're good. Once you get in there, um, so just get started. I think that's the biggest advice is start the process and reach out to any of us if you have questions. And then just one more time, anyone else have any questions that they wanted to ask? Anything like that? All right, Jamie, Daniel, Sally, anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up? Okay. All right. Like I said, feel free to reach out to us. Jamie's information's here, Sally's information's here, my information is here. Feel free to reach out to any of us. You can reach out to me, and if I don't know the answer, I'll reach out to Daniel, Jamie, or Sally. But let us know, and don't feel bad about asking. I think that's the other thing too. We want people to use PTAP, so please reach out with anything. There's no stupid questions. We always say that with MS4. Same with PTAP. Uh, Any information and anything you need is something that we want to make sure we can help with. All
I
right.
guess
So,
I had
oh yeah.
one quick comment, because Mike also put in the chat the error that I was seeing after I submitted happened to him last week, and he was refreshing the page, and that seemed to work. So there was actually just a big update to the Drupal on the site I don't even know exactly what that is. It's something with the website and the database. But there was a big update and migration of the database. So we are still finding a couple little quirks here and there that we're having to address. So if you have something like that, I haven't seen this issue before, and I'm glad, Mike, you mentioned that, because we want to know those issues so that we can address them. So if you have any quirks like that that you see with the site, just please send us an email so that we can follow up on it, follow up and make sure it gets fixed.
Perfect. All right. If there's nothing else, we'll let you all go a little bit early. You gained a half an hour. Hopefully you can squeeze something in there. But again, reach out if you have any questions, and thank you everybody for coming to the workshop today.